evening. I'm very happy to introduce this evening the program that the Parish of the Holy Spirit here in Pocatello has to present to you today. It's a presentation of what we know about this church from the past, the present, and I hope to speak about the future of this church. I am very honored to be pastor and the minister of this church for the last 7 years. This is a church that was built 125 years this year. We are celebrating 125 years. It's the oldest standing church, Catholic church in Idaho. So you are part of important history in Idaho. There's another church in north of Idaho. It's called Pocatello, but that Pocatello church is not as probably 5 years younger than this church. So the Monsignor who bought this land to build this church, it seems to me that had a great vision. He thought this could be the cathedral of the Diocese of Boise. At that time it wasn't a diocese, it was there are several steps of a territory to become a diocese. It was at that time a vicariate. In other words, they were sending bishops, but this didn't have the numbers that needed to have to be a diocese. It was not too long after he built this church that the territory was transformed into a diocese. So it is a great privilege to be pastor here. I keep telling you that this is the best thing that happened to me, to have been able to come to Pocatello and like in the gospel, remember the first miracle of Jesus, that he transformed the water into wine, and people said the owner of the party left the best wine for the last. So for me, this is a real evidence that miracle happened in my person.
My name is Bill O'Brien. I'm a member of the Adult Faith Formation Committee in the parish. And so I'm going to introduce our speakers. Before I start, there is a restroom available over in the building next door in case you're not familiar with the layout here. So if you go through the back door and across, the restrooms are in there. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. I think we're in for a real treat. Our two speakers will give us a history of this beautiful and really spectacular historical Pocatello building. Dr. LaVonne Mills was born in Pocatello, attended St. Joseph's School, and graduated from the school's last class in 1968. She's an active parishioner here at St. Joseph and has been a physician for 29 years. Paul Yochum is originally from Pennsylvania. He and his wife Judy came to Pocatello in 1993 and immediately joined the church across the street. Paul lives over here in the corner. He has served on the Parish Finance Council, the Committee to Restore St. Joseph's Chapel, and has served as an usher here for 20 years. And I should mention that within the next few days, if you want to see this again or recommend this talk to someone else, this presentation will be on our parish YouTube channel. At the conclusion of those two talks, we will hear Shelley Harden, who is a local musical artist, perform on our organ, which is itself over 100 years old. And we do have one request, hold your questions until we are done. So I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, they will stay later if you have more questions after the regular questions have been fielded. So without further ado, here comes Dr. Mills.
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start in 1885, so before the church was built, because I need to build the picture for you. So in 1885, Reverend Alphonsus Joseph Glorieux was consecrated Bishop of the Idaho Territory in April of 1885. He was born in the province of West Flanders, Belgium, on February 1st, 1844. He attended the public schools, but was then able to attend a 6-year collegiate course near his hometown, where he completed his collegiate studies in 1863 when he was 19 years old. He then chose to become a missionary priest to the Northwest Territories of the U.S. 4 years later, at age 23, he was ordained on August 17, 1867, at the American College of the Immaculate Conception at Louvain, Belgium. The U.S. bishops had organized the American College Seminary in 1858, just 5 years before he entered seminary. For centuries, the University of Louvain had been considered the premier Catholic university in Europe. The U.S. and Idaho would greatly benefit from these Belgian and European classically well-educated young priests. Young Father Glorieux worked as a diocesan priest in Oregon for 4 years under Archbishop Seeger's direction. The Archbishop was very impressed with him, and so at age 27, in 1871, Father Glorieux was appointed president of St. Michael's College in Portland. Father Glorieux served as president for 14 years until 1885, when at age 41, he became the new bishop of the Idaho Territory. When Bishop Glorieux arrived in Boise, he had only 2 priests for all of southern Idaho, and 4 priests serving in North Idaho, with 2 of them Jesuits from Gonzaga. As Idaho was growing with Catholics, the bishop hoped for more churches to be built, plus Catholic schools and hospitals. But he insisted on what he called pay as you go along, which meant very limited debt. As the bishop was quite desperate for more priests, he wrote to the rector of the seminary in Belgium, Reverend John Deneve, the same rector as when he was in seminary 20 years earlier, and pleaded for more priests as soon as possible. Father Deneve recruited a young seminarian named Cyril Van der Donckt, who said he would go to Idaho. But there was a problem. Bishop Glorieux first had to request a dispensation from the Pope, who was Pope Leo XIII, as young Cyril was too young to be ordained in 1887. Cyril Van der Donckt was born on January 29, 1865, probably in East Flanders, Belgium. Young Cyril was a precociously brilliant student of the same kind of European classic education as Bishop Glorieux. Young Cyril entered Rene College at age 11. He completed college studies by age 17. He then entered seminary at St. Nicholas Seminary, but completed his seminary studies at the American College of the Immaculate Conception at Louvain, Belgium. He finished all his seminary requirements in 20 months. As seminary ordination approached in June 1887, he was still 20 months before the canonical age of 24 required for ordination. But Pope Leo XIII did grant the dispensation, and Reverend Cyril Van der Donckt was ordained June 24th, 1887. Father Cyril arrived in Boise 3 months later on September 22nd, 1887. He settled right in with the help of his mentors, Bishop Glorieux and Father Francis Hartley. And he too became a circuit rider, pioneer priest. He first experienced missionary work in the mining towns in the Boise Basin, then he went to Haley. Like all the circuit rider priests, he traveled by train, stagecoach, and horseback, and oftentimes walked long distances. His life was different now. He had few physical comforts in life and endless work to do, but he had a sincere desire to help people on their journey to salvation. Also in 1887, Bishop Glorieux learned that the Utah and Northern Railroad had decided to move their shops from Eagle Rock, which would become Idaho Falls, to Pocatello, and the Oregon Shortline Railroad decided to move its shops from Shoshone to Pocatello. There wasn't a town of Pocatello yet in 1887, and only a junction with 200 acres for right-of-way through the Fort Hall Reservation. The consolidation of the shops at Pocatello meant several hundred men would be relocating to Pocatello, and many would be Catholic and have families. The bishop knew there would soon be a town and the Catholics would need a priest. At Bishop Glorieux's request, Father Van der Donckt officially began his duties in Pocatello on the first anniversary of his ordination, June 24, 1888, when he was 23 years old. Here he established a new parish that he named St. Joseph's after the patron saint of Belgium. In addition to his Pocatello parish, his assigned missions would reach from Glens Ferry to Haley, to Montpelier, to Eagle Rock, and on to Salmon. This was his flock for 5 years, with help from Bishop Glorieux and occasional help from others. From 1893 until 1899, he retained much of eastern Idaho as his parish, from Montpelier to Idaho Falls. To describe Father Cyril, the people of the time can do it best. A book, Bannock County History, published in 1915 and written by author Arthur Saunders, mentions Father Cyril. Quote, "No reference to the religious growth of Pocatello would be complete without a sketch of the Reverend Father Cyril Van der Donckt. The hardships, discouragements, and indifference call for no ordinary amount of pluck and perseverance, and great credit is due to the man who faces them unflinchingly and who, out of nothing, builds up a flourishing and useful work." And for the Idaho Catholic Register, Recollections about Father Van der Donckt by Mrs. T.J. Conlin, written after Father died in 1939. Quote, "No one could catch the greatness of the soul that was Father Cyril Van der Donckt, and only the old-timers of Pocatello and the missions thereabout can know what I mean. The mention of his name will bring to their minds the slight, hurrying figure, reading as he walked along the streets, even while crossing traffic. The sensitive face with eyes nearsighted from a lifetime of study. The beautiful, cultured voice with its slight and most charming accent. The endearing eccentricities, the friendliness and solicitude for the welfare of each person. The simple tastes, the love of music, the joy in things, the hearty and infectious life, the self-effacing modesty, the sincere piety, and yet the knowledge of everyday life, the grasp of business and of the problems which face the fathers in their daily work and the mothers in their homemaking and rearing of their children. He had the same regard for the majesty of the human soul, whether that soul belonged to a small child, to one of his poorest Indian converts, or to the bankers, railroad officials, and influential businessmen all over the West who were proud of his friendship and eager to grant him any favor. And to him there were no such barriers as station, color, or nationality. I like to think of Father now in the company of the saints whom he loved, whose lives he studied so diligently." And so on your handout there is a picture of Father, that you can picture him a little bit better. In 1889, the U.S. government bought 2,000 acres from the Indian tribe at Fort Hall for the soon-to-be city of Pocatello. And in the same year of 1889, the government did a survey to lay out the blocks and lots of the future townsite. And thus, 3 lots on the corner of the 100 block of South Garfield and West Center were selected for the first St. Joseph's Church. It was a 22 by 50 foot frame building built in November to December 1889. For $500, a parishioner named Harry Shufflebarger financed the building. Father Cyril had his quarters in the sacristy in the back of the church for many years, without what they call conveniences or cooking facilities. In this early church, Father Cyril had a lending library of 60 books from his own collection. And this first church also had an organ that was purchased by selling 200 subscriptions to the New York Catholic News. As a side note, these 3 lots, I believe, are where Carnegie Library now stands. The frame church was moved to the North Hayes block in May of 1900 and used as a parish hall. Father Cyril sold the 3 lots in August 1904 for $1,800 on behalf of the parish to the Pocatello Women's Civic Club, who were requesting a Carnegie Library grant, and of course, they did get the grant. Idaho became a state July 3rd, 1890. Despite Idaho no longer being a territory, the Diocese of Boise was not designated until August 1893 by Pope Leo XIII. Bishop Glorieux continued on as the new first diocesan bishop. In 1890, the surveyed lots and blocks in Pocatello townsite were officially sold at auction. So the church was built, but they were officially sold. People were very kind. Father Van der Donckt purchased the 3 lots on the corner of South Garfield and West Center, plus 1 block on North Hayes for St. Joseph's Parish, and 2 blocks on North 7th for a future St. Anthony's Parish and Hospital. Reportedly, he paid $730 for all the property with his own money. Eager for a school, a 3-story brick first St. Joseph's School was built on the North Hayes location and completed in November 1891. The top 3rd floor was where the nuns would live when they could be recruited. The cost was listed by Father Cyril at $4,685 for the building, and when all the furnishings were included, the school total cost was $6,486. Father Cyril made a large donation himself and reportedly personally guaranteed a loan of $2,000 from a priest mentor of his, who also was Belgian and affiliated previously with the American College at LaVonne. His name was Father Florimond de Broeker. To finish funding the new school, the ladies of the parish raised $1,200 from a concert and other fundraisers. Money was also raised by selling subscriptions. It was said that usually the majority of the fundraising fell to Father Van der Donckt, who was always in full agreement with Bishop Glorieux's policy of pay as you go along. With the school building ready, 4 Sisters of the Holy Cross from Notre Dame, Indiana, arrived to open a new Catholic school in September 1892. Sisters of the Holy Cross were already teaching in Boise at the Catholic school since 1889. The Sisters of the Holy Cross St. Joseph's School in Pocatello would continue for 75 school years, ending with my 8th grade class in June 1968. In 1892, by an act of the Idaho legislature, Pocatello officially became a city. Then, in 1893, there was a recession across the country which delayed plans for major fundraising and building. Father Cyril had very much wanted a new church soon after the school was built. But with the recession, I believe Father Cyril just took more time to better plan for the holy church he wanted to build in Pocatello. He planned a Gothic revival stone church that would be 40 feet by 90 feet and seat 325 people. An article in the Idaho State Journal in 1961 said the architect for the church was a gentleman named Frank Schmidt. The Pocatello Tribune in 1897 suggested Mr. Frank G. Schmidt was a Pocatello resident and local building contractor. Plus, the newspaper carried brief paragraphs of interest to readers, which suggested he and his family were St. Joseph's parishioners. But the question I have is, was there another contributing architect who was professionally trained in Gothic revival churches? I believe there was another architect, and I believe such an architect was a parishioner of St. John's Parish in Boise and would have been well known to the bishop since 1895. This architect's name was Charles Frederick Hummel. I cannot prove it, but it makes sense to me that Father Cyril and the bishop would have wanted Mr. Hummel's help. In the years between 1895 and before 1900, Mr. Hummel did not keep many identifiable records of his architecture projects. But after 1900, he entered into a partnership with a gentleman named John Tourtellotte, and they would be the architect firm to design 21 of Idaho's Catholic churches from 1900 to 1941, including our St. Anthony's Church in 1941. The architect firm of these two men also designed 22 other Catholic buildings and remodels from 1900 to 1941. Mr. Hummel designed the Gothic Revival St. Bernard's Church in Blackfoot in 1902. St. John's Cathedral design, which began in 1904, Bishop Glorieux's Boise home was designed in 1905, and the firm was selected to design the Idaho Capitol building in 1906. Charles Frederick Hummel was born in Baden, Germany in 1857 and formally trained as an architect at the technical school in the city of Stuttgart. Baden, Germany at that time had many old medieval Gothic churches. Charles, his wife Marie, and two young sons emigrated to the U.S. in 1885. They were living in Everett, Washington when the recession of 1893 began. Needing to find new opportunities to work, the family then chose to settle in Boise in 1895 when Charles was 38 years old. He worked some on his own until about 1900 when he joined John Tourtellotte, another Boise architect and contractor, as a partner in Tourtellotte and Company. In 1910, the architecture firm would be called Tourtellotte and Hummel. These two men are recognized as the most important architects in Idaho state history. And again, you've probably seen the name Hummel on the fence over by the addition to Pocatello High School. That is modern day from this original firm. By late 1896, excavation had begun on the new Gothic Revival stone St. Joseph's Church, with a lava foundation and furnace cellar finished by December. We know the sandstone for the exterior of the church was quarried on the Fort Hall Reservation and provided for free by the U.S. Department of Interior. For the Pocatello Tribune newspaper, the building of the church cost $7,000, but it would take more thousands of dollars to finish it, so the total cost was $10,000. Father Cyril was able to get a large donation from railroad officials, plus a rebate of half the railroad transportation costs. The railroad was thus the largest donor for St. Joseph's Church. The history booklets for St. Joseph's Church record that the building's lumber came from Montpelier, the lime from Bancroft, and the stained glass windows and pews from Portland. These places were all along the railroad for easy shipping. Portland was well known to Bishop Glorieux. Both the bishop and Father Cyril knew well the towns and people of Montpelier and Bancroft. Our stained glass windows were almost certainly created by the renowned Povey Brothers Artworks of Portland. The Povey brothers were known as the Tiffany of the Northwest for stained glass windows. Quote, their windows were considered to have extraordinary quality and beauty, and the firm's work was virtually unequaled in the Pacific Northwest. Today, Povey Brothers windows are a mark of pride in many landmark buildings in Portland and Oregon. Povey Brothers imported their glass from Europe, but designed and constructed their windows in Portland. They were known for their use of what were referred to as jewels, which were small and thickly cut, faceted pieces of glass in rich colors. And I think it's pretty obvious when you look at our windows that that fits the description. The Povey brothers did not begin signing their work until 1923, but it is said if the windows made in Portland were intricate and beautiful, they were almost certainly made by the Povey brothers. The Povey brothers were in business from 1888 until 1928. Their first commission was the First Presbyterian Church in Portland, completed in 1890, so Father could have visited there. One of the prominent stained glass windows in the First Presbyterian Church is a circular Star of David window, much like ours in the front of the church, and there's a picture of it on the back side of your handout. Our pews were most likely made, I believe, by Nicholas Strahan of Portland, who made the pews for the First Presbyterian Church. Mr. Strahan was from Portland, but received training for his woodworking expertise in England. The Portland area was known for its beautiful woods, to be used in woodworking, which sounds like our 125-year-old pews in which you are seated. The First Presbyterian Church of Portland is a Gothic Revival stone church. Inspiration for St. Joseph seems obvious. Father Cyril, I believe, got the same quality craftsmanship from these renowned men, but with a bit more simplicity, and probably our treasures were more affordable for a small railroad town, but they are still magnificent. On December 19, 1897, St. Joseph's Church was dedicated at Mass by Bishop Glorieux. Two of Father Cyril's close priest friends assisted in the dedication Mass. Father W.J.A. Hendricks, a pioneer priest also, and recently assigned to Montpelier, and Father Patrick Krishnahan, pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Ogden. The picture on the front of your handout is what the church inside looked like for the dedication. The four statues in that picture, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, Our Lady of Lourdes, St. Joseph of the Christ Child, and St. Anthony of Padua, are what you can see in our church today. As a side note, the statue of St. Teresa Littleflower that is in the choir loft was added by a donation in the 1950s. The Pieta in the picture eventually broke when being moved and had to be discarded for the history. The current electric lighting fixtures were not present in 1898, but are in the picture from 1930 on the back of the handout. The cross over the altar in the 1898 picture, I believe, is the cross on the front of the handout. Pictured that is now in the sacristy on this side, on the wall, and has likely been in that same spot in the sacristy for 100 years since our current back altar was put in place. The 6 bronze candlesticks on the altar today look to be the very same as in the 1898 picture. Sorry that the picture's blurry, I cannot find a better picture, but if you look at the outline, they've got to be the very same ones from 125 years ago. Pocatello Tribune, December 22nd, 1897. Quote, "The glory of the year's achievement in the building line is the new Catholic church which was dedicated last Sunday. It is architecturally the handsomest structure in the city. The interior has not been finished, but will be severely plain but beautiful. So far it has cost $7,000, and several thousand more will be needed before completion. At the present time, this is the tallest building in Pocatello." Toward completion of Father Cyril's plan, and keeping with pay-as-you-go, 3 bells from the Henry Stuxty Bell Foundry Company arrived in 1900 from St. Louis, Missouri. The company made bells from 1855 to 1931 when the Depression started in high gear. The St. Joseph's Church bells were named James 800 pounds, John 500 pounds, and Peter 1,000 pounds, and they were blessed by Bishop Glorieux. The Catholic Church has had a special ceremony for blessing of bells since the 11th century. The bishop washes the bells with holy water on the outside and then anoints on the outside with the oil of the infirm. On the inside of the bell, the bishop anoints with chrism oil and prays over the bells the following prayer. Quote, "At the sounding of the bell, put the demons to flight, protect from storms, and call the faithful to prayer. The Henry Stucksteed Bell Foundry Company was the largest bell foundry west of Cincinnati. The company brochure of 1906 listed the bells as being tuned each differently. 500 pounds was tuned to C, 800 pounds to A, and 1,000 pounds to G. From the foundry brochure, quote, "The bells made in this well-known establishment are renowned on account of the copiousness of their sound, extent of the copiousness of their tone, extent of their sound, and on account of their durability. We think our bells are beyond competition, for our molds are made according to mathematical formulas, the result of diligent study and much experience. These bells also arrived by way of the railroad. Their reported total cost was $660. These 2,300 pounds of bells continue to be rung before each Sunday Mass as you heard them this evening. The bell tower has had to be reinforced, I believe, twice in the last 122 years. Our Teller Sommerhoff organ was installed beginning on February 3rd, 1915 by Mr. Sommerhoff himself. The history booklets say the organ was installed about 1905, but a carved date inside the organ's pipe enclosure and an article in the Pocatello Tribune confirms February 3rd, 1915. A grand organ concert was then held February 15th, 1915, with a celebrated organist, Professor McClellan from Salt Lake City, performing. The history booklets have always said that it was Senator Du Bois who was able to get a grant for St. Joseph's from Andrew Carnegie for $1,000 for the organ, and the ladies of the parish raised $1,200. All that is likely true, but the rest of the story is that Andrew Carnegie donated grants towards 7,000 organs across the world in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Parishes were able to apply for the grant on their own, with one person being the contact person, and the stipulation that at least half the amount of money needed for the organ of choice be raised first by the local parish. I was able to find the list of the organ grants in the handwritten online records kept at Columbia University's rare book and manuscript collection in New York City. Clearly, between September 1914 and November 1914 is written Pocatello, Idaho, St. Joseph's, R.C., meaning Roman Catholic. And then crossed out. On the next page, the contact person, Mrs. S.A. McCabe, who indeed was an organist and parishioner of St. Joseph's, is also crossed out. By 1914, Senator Du Bois was no longer senator, and he was living in Washington, D.C. Senator Du Bois's obituary lists him as a, quote, founder of Pocatello. He was an Idaho territorial delegate from 1886 to 1890, and then U.S. Senator from Idaho from 1890 to 1897. He considered Blackfoot his hometown after moving there in 1880, and that is where he is buried. Father Cyril would thus have known him and likely wrote to him for his help that obviously worked. And we have had this incredible and historic pipe organ for 107 years. The first St. Joseph's Church of 1889 had an organ, and it was most likely moved to the new church choir loft in 1897. Such an organ as the Teller Sommerhoff was probably not planned at that time, as the beautiful inside of the stained glass window with the Star of David had to be covered up when the new Teller Sommerhoff pipe organ was installed. When the opportunity arose for a classic pipe organ, Father Cyril must have done all he could to add this expensive organ to his new Gothic Revival church. Father Cyril signed his name as rector of St. Joseph's Church, Pocatello, Idaho, on the tag for the pipe organ that is attached and hidden from view inside the wooden enclosure up above. And so I was able to see that, take a picture, but sorry, his signature didn't turn out real well because of the reflection, but it's there. In April 1917, Bishop Glorieux died unexpectedly at age 73. He had been Father Cyril's mentor and close friend for 30 years. Between 1919 and 1922, copper was installed to cover the octagonal steeple over the open belfry of St. Joseph's Church, and it is still there today. In June 1921, Father Cyril left Pocatello for Los Angeles after 33 years in Pocatello. He was 56 years old. The Pocatello Tribune newspaper article after the 25th anniversary celebration on December 10, 1922 said Father Van der Donckt had briefly returned and was present for the special mass. And then, probably in 1923, in early 1923, our truly beautiful Gothic-style altar with the Last Supper and the Stations of the Cross were finally installed to complete Father Cyril's plan for his beloved St. Joseph's Church. Our parishioner, Mrs. Priscilla Smith's mother, Mrs. Sarah Devaney, had been secretary for Father Van der Donckt from about 1915 until Father Cyril left. Priscilla recalled her mother, Sarah, saying she herself ordered the beautiful Gothic Stations of the Cross and the altar from Belgium, just as Father Van der Donckt instructed. Priscilla recalls that her mother told her that Father Cyril had paid for the altar and Stations of the Cross by himself. They were shipped from Belgium to Portland and transported from Portland to Pocatello by railroad, of course. These crowning jewels became the heart of historic St. Joseph's Church for the last 100 years, as you see in the picture dated about 1930. Their story brings us to pause as we realize they were created just after World War I in a devastated Belgium, and then shipped to Pocatello to be a holy blessing for us for generations to come. Thank you.